Hello and welcome to the Law Deals podcast, where we discuss law firm succession plans, profitable law partnerships, and law firm purchases and sales. I'm your host, Ed Alexander. I've practiced transactional business law for 30 years, have my own practice, Alexander Business Law, and I'm a principal with Fitzgibbon Alexander, a business intermediary firm. We're on a mission to make sales of law firms commonplace so you can enjoy your practice and your life.
In today's episode, I'm talking to Charley Mann, a law firm coach and really business of law entrepreneur. I've known Charley for many years, having first met him at a great legal marketing summit in 2016. So Charley, please introduce yourself and Law Firm Alchemy to the Law Deals audience.
Ed, it's great to be talking with you. Yeah, it's amazing to think it's been 8 years at this point. That's sort of astonishing. I've also had the privilege to meet your wife, Faith, as well. So I've gotten to know you all over the years. And you've seen sort of where all of this has gone for me. In the last 14 years, I've been working in, for, with, and on law firms, and particularly law firm owners, which is increasingly, I recognize that's where the specialty lives for me, is working primarily with the owner, not necessarily the firm writ large, but the owner on developing an entrepreneurial tool set. Because if we develop a tool set, we develop an accordant mindset, and that allows us to achieve big growth and possibility within the law firms. And so it might be now my adoptive industry, but I consider it just the place that I absolutely love doing what I do.
Excellent, excellent. So I always find it helpful to understand the path that people have taken to come where they are. And so tell us about your path.
Yeah, so I was a theater major in college, right? And I kind of came down that road because I had stopped playing sports after moving around several times as a kid and finding theater in high school. And it was the one thing that I was passionate about, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with it necessarily. But as I was getting closer and closer towards graduating, I recognized that there was one thing that was more important to me than being an actor, director, production manager, etc. And that was being a husband and father. And so I started to think about what my professional life was going to look like. And I'm applying to these jobs on this little old place known as Craigslist back in ye day. And I stumbled upon this job opening from someone you and I both know, Ben Glass, and this double business model that he had, Ben Glass Law and Great Legal Marketing. And I applied for that opportunity. And, I almost hate the saying, and the rest is history. But the quick version of that history is I started focusing primarily in the law firm at first with a little bit in Great Legal Marketing. Then about year 4 or so in that, I went full bore into Great Legal Marketing, ran that company for about a decade, and decided in the last year to go out on my own to bring some brand new ideas and relationships into the market.
Scratch that entrepreneurial niche, right?
That's exactly right. For me, the thing that I love more than, say, the money of it all, and don't get me wrong, I do enjoy the money part, is I love the responsibility. I like answering to me, and I like answering to the bigger, broader puzzle and picture rather than, say, a single role. That isn't to say that being an intrapreneur isn't as valuable as being an entrepreneur. I was able to do a lot of work as an intrapreneur, but I always knew that ownership was going to be part of my life. Well, I say always. I mean, within the last decade, I understood that at some point ownership was going to be part of my life. I didn't really know what entrepreneurship could be like. My dad was an FBI agent. My mom's teacher. Being an entrepreneur, that wasn't really part of the family history, really. I mean, even looking at almost all of my relatives going back a couple of generations just wasn't something we did. And so not in a black sheep way, more in like a golden star, the gold sheep way. That's the way that I'll put it now. I've invented that just for this moment. Not the black sheep, but the gold sheep. Decide, hey, I want to own something. I want to build it. I want to have the responsibility. And I'm completely honest, I want the financial rewards behind it as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of it. It really is, right? I mean, it's not the thing you can totally focus on, but it's the thing that comes. It's the benefit for taking that risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of the things that I always talk about with lawyers in particular is that if at the end of the day, you're in a practice, you're not enjoying it, and you're not making the money, go to work for somebody else or change careers or do something like that, right? Because you've got to have a profit component out of taking this risk to be a legal entrepreneur.
Yeah. And I think it's important that in whatever business someone is in, they don't feel ashamed or abashed about wanting the financial risk to be less than the total financial reward, right? We want this balance to be struck well in favor of it being a rewarding choice. And that's certainly a hang up that a lot of business owners have, especially in law firms where, and Ed, I mean, you've seen this up close, right? Especially with the sale of a practice, where there's this strange conflict of the desire to serve clients and to serve many clients, being very, very mission oriented, which is something I love and adore about this profession, while reconciling it against something that is also associated with lawyers, which is making money, right? That's a perception that people have. And of course, if they were to look up statistics about average amount that an attorney makes, it's in excess of $120,000 per year, which is for the average American, they're going, oh my gosh, that's a good bit of money for one person to make. Never mind the fact that if you rotate it down closer to, say, an associate in a small firm, the real number usually falls between $75,000 to $85,000 per year, which suddenly people are going, why would I go to law school? That's expensive to end up there. But all of that to say, it is okay to want the financial side to be better for you. It is okay to say, I am in this for the helping people and for making money. And I think a real adult perspective versus a sort of childhood or teenagery perspective is to say, you can only be in it for one or the other. An adult is capable of saying, I can be in it for both and do both of these things successfully together.
Right, exactly. And at the end of the day, if the money isn't there, then the practice isn't going to stay viable long or at all, right?
That's right.
And so the both components do have to be there. It just can't be one or the other. Well,
that's right.
You know, when it comes to putting information out there, I'll tell you, I want to acknowledge you for everything that you're putting out into the world. I mean, you've worked with a lot of lawyers, you know, startups, small firm lawyers, larger firm lawyers. But the information and the materials that you're putting out really show the experience you have working in this field. You know, they're on point and they're actionable. And so one of the things I want to recommend my listeners to do is to most certainly follow you on LinkedIn and then also, you know, subscribe to your podcast. They don't teach this in law school. I love it and everything else. So with that in mind, I want to talk to you about some things that really impact lawyers who are looking to create scalable practices so they can, you know, our shtick is so they can enjoy their practices and their lives, right? And then ultimately so they can create a saleable practice. So the first thing I want to talk about is I saw you give a great presentation at the Great Legal Marketing Summit in October. I loved it. I believe it was called the $500,000 referral marketing system or marketing plan. And so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one of the things we just talked about a moment ago was the kind of bringing some information to market, right? That has a different twist on it and having sometimes an eerie level of accuracy to it. And this relates to this referral playbook here. That is from being a really committed observer of the patterns of success. I even tell all of my coaching clients, I'll tell every customer, client, member, etc. I am not here to give you 100% odds because that's not fair for anyone to give. To say that something works 100% of the time just means you're lying or your case study set is too small. My responsibility is to give you the best odds possible, because if most law firm owners are making business decisions with let's be generous and say a 20 to 30% success rate, and I can move you to a 55, 60, maybe even 70% success rate and keep you in the game longer, that's going to produce outstanding success. And one of the patterns that I saw was Yeah, there's a lot of talk about digital marketing, Ed. I mean, we see so many digital marketing things out there. There's so many wonderful companies. I've got friends in that area: Tom Foster, Seth Price, Conrad Sam, Guy Sakalakis, Cooper Saunders. I could go on, and they all provide great services. The issue and the gap was an erroneous approach toward referral marketing, which still did rely oftentimes on the old-fashioned do good work and the cases will come, in addition to standard form networking. And the big problem with this is good referral marketing should be about making the right connections, so a level of specificity, reaching out to make the right connections, and then finding ways to nurture those connections over a duration of time that other people believe is unattainable for them. Mm-hmm. So I created this simple referral playbook, and it relies on 3 very simple and eminently achievable steps. Let me say, in terms of a practice what you preach thing, I do this in my own business. I have duplicated this referral playbook for myself in a coaching organization, and I would duplicate it in literally any business that I were to go into. So the playbook itself, the 3 components. First off, I'm going to be very technical about these. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to schedule 2 meetups per week, usually coffees or lunches with real live human beings. And there's 3 types of people I want you to have these meetups with. The first group is other attorneys, including the people you perceive as competitors. Because guess who is receiving calls from your ideal client? Your competitors. Now, your competitors may not actually work with your ideal client. They may work with their ideal client, and they would love to refer you your ideal client. So that's why we meet with the competitors. And then nominally close or adjacent practice areas. We won't get into too much detail in a moment on that. The second category is related professionals. So obvious ones, estate planners with financial advisors, the personal injury folks with chiropractors, physios, orthopedists, etc. And then the third category is community leaders. And if we look at the common thread through all these, it's who's getting in front of the people I want to get in front of, plain and simple. So we get our 2 meetups per week going on. Then we're going to send a monthly mailer, and I mean in the daggum mail, print. It has to be on real live paper. I know it terrifies people, and yet we all love receiving letters, which is the funny part. And then a weekly email. So with the mailer, I have to emphasize direct mail, like physical thing. With the weekly email, I have to emphasize weekly. Monthly is not enough. Weekly will actually reduce your overall unsubscribe rate and get you more traffic to your website, more referrals to your firm, build better relationships. I mean, literally, I have clients, Ed, who they do this, they start sending this out, and within a few weeks, they get people who will respond directly to the email saying, oh, I have someone I need to send to you, right? Just because they're consistent with it. So those 3 components together, just do those. Don't overthink it, by the way. Just do those things, and you will produce results.
And I know the book, which I've read and love, it really goes into the kind of the details, like what abouts and what ifs and things of that nature. I had been working with another organization many, many years ago. The name of that organization is Atticus, right? So you must be aware of them. They're in the space.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And they have a referral system. It's not nearly comprehensive like yours, but I've implemented that system. And I will tell you, having worked that system, when I basically opened my practice individually, now I'd been practicing before, but this practice was open in 2005. And I had been out there in the community for years before that, but consistently doing this kind of 2 days a week, keep in touch, that kind of thing. Mm. And I mean, the annuity that you develop by doing that it just continues to pay off over and over again. So it's a great system. Now, there may be some people thinking that, hey, Ed, in the past, one of the things that you've talked about is removing the lawyer from the marketing piece and not having everything wrapped up in you as an individual and your person being there, right? Because that's part of the value of the firm. So let's talk a little bit about that and the system and how we can make sure that it doesn't just come completely wrapped up in the lawyer.
Okay, I love that because earlier when we talked about like the adult way of thinking is to hold 2 seemingly competitive ideas as equal to each other. So we're about to do that. We're going to reconcile these ideas right here of okay, I'm going to use my person in order to get more clients, but I also at the same time need to inoculate my firm against myself being a necessity for getting more clients. So a few things to do. One, this is obviously only part of your marketing playbook, right? Let's state that up front. I don't believe that a firm should rely on a single modality of getting and attracting, converting clients. Multimodal, multimedia, multi-channel. Those are our multi-words for marketing. So that's point number one. Point number two is this is a great way for you to accelerate initial growth of your firm or to produce that next six-figure, multi-six-figure, depending on the size, maybe even seven-figure bump in the practice. So we can put some fuel on our existing fire, which can give us resources to invest in, say, better, more robust digital marketing, et cetera. But now let's get into the real reconciliation of it, which is as the firm grows and you develop it into, say, a saleable asset. First off, you have your weekly email that is now an overall asset to the firm. And we can start to transfer that away from being, say, Ed as key personality to using a little bit more of a royal we within the marketing. I will say it helps if we can maybe have multiple personalities. I actually think Adam Rawson, Rawson Law Firm, he does a good job in his social media marketing, for example, of making other attorneys within the firm the stars of the show. And he does it in such a way that, and he has enough attorneys to do this well, where if one of those attorneys, quite frankly, were to leave the practice, no one would notice because there's so many other characters within the organization. And that's actually an interesting component to play with is what are the characters within the organization? What are the personas that you use in your marketing? So we start to go towards that royal we concept. And that works for the mailer. That works for the email, which, by the way, that type of marketing asset, that regularity, that knowing what you're spending on that makes it rhythmic, makes it saleable to someone because you have a list. And as you work towards that sale, let's say you've identified your when you roughly want to sell the practice, you have that final sort of 3-year sprint that you're going through, cleaning up the books, yada, 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 making sure you're all ready to go. During that time, you can start doing a major transition on your marketing materials to build in more of that royal we concept to help out any buyer that you're going to have. Now, on the meetups front, over time, your job is to also get key team members to handle the meetups for you. You don't need to be involved in all of them forever. You can absolutely have people on your staff who are expected to be part of the meetup process. It's funny, I was just talking about this recently with someone else, Ed, about the idea of should I have my attorneys doing the meetups? It depends on the practice that you have. It depends on your business model. Some people just want their attorneys doing legal work. Some want them generating cases. You know, you want a strong business model, and then we're going to build in these systems in order to support it. But you can also have community ambassadors, like a marketing person in your firm whose job it is to do this system. And by the way, I'm calling it a system. I'm calling it a playbook, because what you can then hand over to your buyer is, this is the playbook. Whether it's you or an attorney that you hire to act as lead attorney, put that person in and on this playbook, and it will be all yours. All of those relationships, all of that gain will be all of yours to have.
It's interesting because it plays into this whole idea that attorneys often have, or owners often have, of hiring attorneys. And, you know, we can't be subject to non-competes, and maybe nobody can pretty soon. I don't know. We'll see. Right. But at the end of the day, you know, the royal we helps out in so many different areas, right? Because when I want to, which I'm going, and by the time this airs, I'll have been back. But, you know, we went on vacation for basically a month in Europe. And the royal we is when people call in, they're going to talk to the team, and they recognize that they're talking to the team, and they recognize that the other lawyers, you know, on the staff are going to be helping out clients, and they can talk directly to them. So really, it's a wonderful thing, helps out in many, many areas. And the other side of that is having that marketing coordinator or marketing person in who, let's be honest, lawyers are not accountable to anybody but the court and the client, right? And so when you're doing marketing, it's easy to say, hey, you know, I got that client work I got to go do, versus writing this week's email. And you can treat them completely differently because that's a have to do. And this one's a probably should do, right? So it's the important versus urgent. And so when you have that marketing coordinator and you give that person permission to mandate or hold you accountable for implementing that system, that is very, very powerful. And they can set up, all parts of that. In fact, when we do our newsletter, and I highly recommend newsletters because talk about the easiest way to stay in front of people is a newsletter, right? And and especially the print newsletter, because people will give you feedback on the print newsletter. They will look at it because it's tangible. But I really recommend that because that is truly an important asset of a sellable practice. So that's great. So I know that the book is available. So tell everybody where they can get that book.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want this referral playbook, which like you said, Ed, it goes into greater detail. Like it'll tell you what content you should put in the emails, content for the monthly mailers. How do you actually identify specific people for the list to send to? And who are you supposed to meet with? And what do you say when you're actually with them? Right? Because I get it. Whenever I ask people to like raise their hand and say, who's an introvert here in the audience? 70% of the room raises their hand, right? Which means the only superpower you really need is to be the one introvert who peels themselves off the wall and starts inviting the other introverts to do the same. So you can get that whole playbook at www.lawfirmalchemy.com/referrals. And if the URL treats you a little poorly, just make sure you have that www at the front. So it's www.lawfirmalchemy.com/referrals. And you can get that whole playbook 100% free.
And we will put those in the show notes for everybody as well.
Fabulous.
One of the series that you have in They Don't Teach This in Law School was creating an investment grade law firm. And you looked at the business, I call it a business of law perspective, but really it was like an investor, right? Mm-hmm. And, it made me think about it's a great reminder that we owners of practices buy our practices every day. And it's always interesting to ask, would you buy your practice today? Because that'll tell you so much. So let me ask you some questions related to that, right? So, many lawyers today have practices that they work for rather than work for them. So what would be the 3 principles that each lawyer should master to create that successful, profitable, and growing law practice?
Oh, that's a good question. 3 principles to master. I'm going to skew it in the direction very much of the sellable asset, right? In terms of mastering that business growth. So first off, I'll say that there's a triangle that I often work off that's so broad that we'll zoom in on some more detailed principles for each, which is a marketing, operations, and finance triangle. Those are sort of the 3 core elements that I coach law firm owners through regularly. So I'll break it down into 1 principle per section that can be applied to a firm that is growing and that it becomes a great sellable asset for you. So on the marketing side of things, and it kind of relates a little bit back to finance, but really on the marketing side of things, the biggest error that I see is a lack of consistency. And this is really going towards growth and towards a sellable asset. Consistency in your marketing is extraordinarily valuable. I would really direct people even towards Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, which is one of the best books of all time on the core ideas of persuading people, of being a person of influence. So I would send them down that path, which he'll talk about consistency and he'll also throw in some frequency. So I'm going to do a little 1A, 1B right there and allow those 2 to attach to each other in your marketing. And then I'm going to talk marketing when I get to the finance area as well. But I like to go from marketing where we have the principles of consistency combined with frequency in our messaging and going over to operations, which now I'll attach a book to that as well. I would attach Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time, because the principle operationally that you should do in growing your firm is to get yourself out of the low-level work. It is highest, best use of your time. There are certain tasks that you, as whatever your most elevated title is in the firm, that only you can uniquely accomplish. And so you need to focus only on that work, and you need to hire people to handle the rest. You'll see a lot of detail on how to do that in Buy Back Your Time. And I would direct people there for great formulas. The earliest hire that I made in my own business was an executive assistant to make sure that I was getting out of checking my emails. I wasn't involved as heavily in scheduling for myself, taking care of all the little stuff as soon as possible. And I hired that person. I was financially ready for it, but it was definitely a little bit uncomfortable. And then within, I don't know, what was it, 3 weeks, I hired a second team member, and definitely, again, I had the money, but it meant that maybe I wouldn't have as much money in my pocket, but made that hire in order to grow, in order to make the deliverables of what I do actually function. So that way I could focus on the highest, best use of my time. And we're already talking right now about who our next couple of hires will be for the business. So operationally, getting out of your own way and highest, best use of your time. Then we come around to finance. So finance, I said I'm going to relate it back to marketing. Finance is all about that investment mentality, right? Exactly what you were alluding to. So if we have consistency and frequency in marketing, we have highest, best use of our time in operations. In finance, it goes straight to the question that you said, which is, would I invest in my practice? And the first thing that you need to know if you're going to invest in your practice is you actually have to know what your numbers are and what they mean. And I would even boil this down, maybe even less than a principle, to a simple action, which is spend time with your numbers, right? Most people are not spending time actually looking at the P&L document. And if they do, they are looking for the big, bold chunk numbers, right? They're looking, where does it say profit? Where does it say income? I kind of know what gross is. I kind of know what net is. Let me double check my bank account. Yeah, this looks kind of right to me. That's the majority of numbers. You will not be as strong of a numbers master as someone who has experience as, say, a CFO, or someone like you, Ed, who works with these numbers all the time. It's why, for me, particularly in the numbers front, a good piece of advice for everyone is get good professionals to help you. Professionals who are willing to not just do the work, but advise you. And I'm going to use the phrase push the envelope, in that they are advocates for you taking risk. And most of the time when we think of our financial professionals, it's only risk mitigation, right? Instead of taking risk. You want financial professionals who understand the idea of taking smart risks with money, whether that's your accountant aggressively pursuing tax reduction opportunities for you, someone who is looking at the numbers of your firm and telling you how much of a budget you actually have and pushing you to invest in things that will turn over cash faster in your practice. Long answer to 3 simple principles. We ended up with 3 books, 3 forms of your firm, and a multitude of principles.
That's great. That's wonderful. Fantastic. So let's just kind of step back to the marketing one real quick, right? This consistency and frequency. And at the end of the day, that's building up the annuity, right? And I'm using the analogy of the annuity, but it's consistency in terms of what you do and the message that you're putting out there. And I've always liked the line that when you're getting bored with your marketing, that means it's just starting to work, right?
That's good.
And it's that consistency of every day do something, right? We don't have to do this grand announcement. We don't have to spend big bucks on advertising campaigns and then wait for everything to come in. It's little bit upon little bit upon little bit. This idea that if you're just doing little bits, the compounding effect is massive, absolutely massive. The operations piece, right? So on the operations side, and I really link operations and finance, because I don't think you can set up the operation unless you understand how your money's coming in, where it's going out, and then, what do you have to achieve? And, Faith and I tend to be a little bit more numbers oriented than your typical person, but we operate the firm based on a model, right? And the issue that I always have with financial professionals is it's looking back historically, right? Now, history is really important, but it doesn't tell you what you're going to do going forward, and it doesn't help you set objectives. And one of the big objectives I always find, a firm will hire an attorney, and then the attorney won't be producing sufficient cash flow from their work, right? And so, you've got to have a target.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to let the attorney know the target. Or frankly, anybody, paralegal, attorney, whatever the job description is, here are the criteria. And then you've got to measure to it. So there's some work involved in it. But at the end of the day, as you said, if it's allowing me to take $125 an hour job off my table and I can go out and bill, $375 or more, that's something you do all day long. If you can get a handle on your firm where you can view it as a machine and you know what levers to push and what valves to turn on and off, and you can see it react to that, that's an amazing superpower to have. It really is.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's hard at first to sort of view, again, something that is designed as a service business to others, a professional service, as a machine, right? It feels like you're crippling the humanity of it. But really, when you have a good machine, you have the ability to hire people at better wages and serve clients in the best way possible. You're going to have that guy or gal down the street who's happy to do $250 wills. That's just the thing that they're going to do, and they will have a hard time getting away from that. And the truth is that if it's the type of person who's listening to this podcast, you probably think about, I'd love to help all of those people that person is helping, but those people currently don't value estate plans enough. And they're not going to be convinced to spend $1,200, $2,500. Now we're getting into, also trust-based planning. We're heading up towards $6,000, $8,000 on a plan. You can't force those people to buy that level of product. But what you can do is put that level of product out there for people who are ready and willing to make that level of investment, who have the values that align with what you're trying to accomplish. And by the way, if that then means that by having those higher level clients, you can do what some attorneys did, say at the beginning of COVID, and offer free power of attorney documents to unlimited number of people in your community. You've done that because you created a premium in your practice that allows you to then produce high quality, lower level work to some folks. I know plenty of people who they charge really high amounts for their estate plans, and they'll charge a lot for the plans, but they then are able to give back to communities that they want to serve, which then are also oftentimes the same communities that then bring clients back in. And we have this wonderful virtuous circle. The truth is, a person doing $250 wills, $75 power of attorneys, that lifestyle sucks. It just does. And maybe that person's okay with it because they are on a certain type of mission. But again, if you're listening to this podcast, that's not you.
Yeah, the important part to remember there is sometimes I'll hear people say, "Oh, well, I'll just bring somebody in who can do those $250 wills," and and having a firm that does high quality work, and then having a firm that I would call a process firm, which is that $250 will firm, they don't play nice together because they have different needs. And if you treat the high-end estate planning client like you do the $250 will client, there's going to be a problem. You're not going to be able to do those. And then if you're trying to give the level of service to a $250 will client that you're giving to a high-end estate planning client, you're going to lose money left and right. And so trying to combine those under one roof is almost always impossible. I never say never. I know you don't like absolutes. But
that's right.
but at the end of the day, it's very, very difficult to do. So, all right, good. All right, one last question for you. So, I used the term in my last question about success, right? So tell me a little bit about what your view of success is from a standpoint of growing a firm. How do you think lawyers should define or measure success?
Okay, so I have my favorite answer for this, which is, and I always love referencing it, it's the Supreme Court trying to define pornography, right? Their old definition of, you know it when you see it. And I think that when it comes to success, for every person, there is a bit of you know it when you see it, and yet your eyes will always lie to you. So there are times that I find a lot of people say, oh, I feel like I'm successful right now. When if you really dig into how their life is currently arranged, they would go, you know what? Never mind. It's about a 6 out of 10. I thought it was a 9 out of 10. It's a 6 out of 10. So there's a difficulty with that, Ed, is once you hit your 9 out of 10, you can get on the hedonic treadmill and find that what you feel was making you happy at the 9 out of 10 really is now a 6, 5, 4, and a continuing to depreciate asset. And this is where I'll get into my actual definition of success. The actual definition of success has to do with you spending the time doing the things that you like with the people you love. And that obviously will be defined differently for different people. And you're probably going to find that no matter what, you don't have the amount of time that you would love to have with every single person in your life who you would love to give time to. You won't ever have fully the amount of money that you would absolutely love to have, because once you get there, it starts to change. So success is really a pursuit. It's an adoration of the chase. It's acceptance that in the chase, you will fail, you will fall, and you will sometimes take 2 steps back before you take 4 steps forward. And falling in love with that chase and falling in love with finding ways to do the things that you like with the people you love, that's what success looks like. And I won't judge someone for wanting to make $1 billion. And I won't judge someone who only wants to work 4 hours per week. But all of those have certain trades to them. So make sure you think it through and you're doing what you like with people you love and you're enjoying the process along the way.
Yeah, hedonic adaptation and moving the goalposts can be a real problem for high achievers, because that's what they've done their whole entire lives is, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And I like that idea. What I found for me anyway, is that when I was younger, I had all these different interests and I wanted to do everything. And really kind of narrowing that down to the things that brought me the most joy are helpful, right? Because if you only got a couple of things that you can go do, it's easy to decide, do I want A or B instead of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all those different things. So how can our audience get in touch with you?
The best way is if you go over to lawfirmalchemy.com, you'll see that there's a couple of ways to jump on and see what it's all about. And I think that's actually really important. Is you've heard what I've talked about with Ed here. This is definitely the exact vibe of where it all goes. I actually think this is a really good representation of the type of discussions that I'm having with coaching clients in my newsletter. And you're going to see something on the site to engage and interact with. And if you're looking for an easy default, in the upper right-hand corner or somewhere on that first page, you're going to see some type of way to get a report, get on the email list. I encourage you to do that and to also listen to They Don't Teach This in Law School. So right now you've got a podcast app open because you're listening to this. Go over and to your podcast app and search for They Don't Teach This in Law School. Ed has been one of my guests on there, so you can find his episode on there as well. And go and give a listen to that as if you're interested in conversations like this one.
Excellent. Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it very much. I love the conversation. It was fantastic, and I appreciate your time.
You as well, Ed.
So if you have one or more questions about building your firm into a sellable firm, I have a resource for you. It's the Guide to Selling Your Florida Law Practice. I wrote this book to help lawyers know what it takes to create that sellable practice so they can enjoy it and they can enjoy their lives. To get your copy, just go over to exitmylawpractice.com. You'll be able to download a free copy there. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you next time. Take care.